All right, we are really pleased to present our last panel, Investing in Climate Tech Solutions. We have an incredibly dynamic group of presenters. Neka Kibule from SVP at Aligned Climate Capital is joining us. Lisa Kruger, President at AES. And lastly, you may know her from the Climate Tech VC newsletter, Sophie Purdom. And we also have our fabulous professor, executive in residence, and the founder of Entrepreneurs for Impact, Chris Wedding, who will moderate. Thank you.
Cool. So Liz told me I should catwalk across stage, but I lost my gumption, sorry. All right, so if you're just joining us, good for you. You joined the best panel of the day, ha ha ha. If you're just joining us, awesome panels. You can mostly catch online except for the one that you really should have been here for in person after lunch. All right, we do have a great panel today, a great roster of women showing us not just how to build businesses in climate tech, but also how to build ecosystems within climate tech, and we'll hear more about that, specifically Green Tech North with NECA and the community around Climate Tech VC, the newsletter that Sophie and team put out. We also have this great kind of range of scales, right? From early stage, which is maybe Sophie's focus, to maybe scaling up with NECA and other capital at Aligned Climate Capital, and then helping companies truly scale, go IPO with Lisa. We joked as we prepped for this panel that maybe I should let my hair down to blend in with the panelists, but again, lost the gumption, ladies, sorry. All right. If things go as planned, and I love to plan, I'm staring at a great plan here. We're going to start with intros, so a couple of minutes on where they come from, where they are, and maybe even a fun fact that most folks don't know, since if you're here at Fuqua, you had to submit 25 of those bad boys, which are pretty fun. We'll go into questions specifically for each panelist, and I believe you all are going to tell me that around 3:50, I'm going to stop talking and look at your questions, hopefully with your names next to them, to get a shout out for our guest here. So let's do that. Howdy, folks. Good to see you all again. Let's see. Lisa, do you want to start us off with who in the heck you are?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lisa Kruger, and I'm an executive vice president at AES. Not the president, I'm the president of our U.S. operations. AES is a global Fortune 500 energy company, and our purpose is really to accelerate the future of energy. So in the U.S. portfolio I run, we have 2 utilities in the Midwest, AES Indiana, AES Ohio, some conventional generation, and then our renewables development business, which is really much more than renewables development. We're a leader in products and services for clients such as Google and Microsoft with 24/7 carbon-free energy solutions based on some of our technology that I'll talk about later. I've been in the energy industry my whole career, a variety of functions, a variety of companies, from infrastructure funds to publicly traded companies to a VC startup that we took public way back in 2006, experienced really rapid growth, and I'll say still is growing and has a market cap of 12 billion. And less than 2 weeks ago at AES and one of our joint ventures with Fluence, we took Fluence public. It's a battery energy storage company, and raised $1 billion in that funding. Fun fact about me, I think I've had a sustainability focus my whole life. And in the startup that I mentioned earlier, at the time of the startup, I helped establish a cradle-to-cradle semiconductor material recycling program that went on to be a mandatory recycling program for all photovoltaic manufacturers in Europe.
Super exciting. Thanks, Lisa. How about Sophie?
Hi, everyone. I'm Sophie. Calling in. I'll do my fun fact first. I'm calling in from London, which is why it's a bit darker here on my screen than on the rest of the panelists. And running with that fun fact, I'm British. You might catch some funky words coming through in this conversation, but I haven't been back in ages, so kind of feeling like a stranger in my original old country. But not here because of that. Here probably because of all things climate and venture. So my quick background is I've always been focused on climate, like most of the ladies here, but for me, that's taken me mostly through the early stage side of the ecosystem. Starting with the ESG space, launching a fund out of the Brown University Endowment and teaching a course on sustainable investing, wrote a book along the way, really care a lot about bringing folks along as this field itself scales up. Took a detour through management consulting, came out the other side and started a early stage business called Kula Bio. And we make a fertilizer using microbes. So lots of deep tech, IP licensing, kind of pre-angel fundraising, and then caught the wind and have scaled that business up pretty significantly. And now I'm taking those learnings and applying it to other early stage startups, sharing my thoughts through a newsletter called Climate Tech VC, which just making sure our connection's good. Okay, great. There we go. I think blacked out for a second. Through a newsletter called Climate Tech VC that goes out to 20,000 folks in the space, be it operators, investors, ecosystem builders. Happy to share more on that, but at a high level, we cover what you need to know. So think the news and the deals, and then how to think about it. So lots of market frameworks and deep dives to really level everybody up and keep us on the same page. So proud that the industry has been moving along at quite a fast clip. And can dive into some detail on the data through the rest of the conversations that we're having here. But I take that journalistic hat off and put on my native kind of investor one, and I'm starting a venture capital fund to invest in these early stage climate tech businesses. So look out for more news there soon on the pre-seed and seed stage, where we'll be deploying a whole lot more needed capital.
Well, here, and I think cue the applause, right? New VC fund for climate, right? So no pressure. We're all waiting on the edge of our seat, Sophie. Awesome, Nneka, go for it.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nneka Chibuli. So excited to be able to talk to you. I am a senior vice president at Align Climate Capital. We're an investment fund that's a firm that's focused on investing in real assets that are focused on decarbonization. For us, that means we have 3 strategies: one that's focused on solar development, a second that's focused on infrastructure funding and project finance, and a third where I spend most of my time, which is supporting and scaling startups from seed to Series B. It's been really excited to get on this journey. I started off really in the oil and gas industry, if I'm honest. I started off with natural gas. I know I'm like hiding, but I do believe in a just transition, as I've had it for myself, and moving through the utility space, spent a lot of time focused on finance and strategy, and eventually worked at NextEra, PG&E, and worked on how do we get these large, organizations to work with startups. Joined a startup accelerator called Elemental Accelerator, and now I'm at a fund. So I feel like I've seen almost every side of the business except for working with startups. So I have a lot to learn from Sophie and all the other founders that I talk to. One thing most people don't know about me, unless you walk next to me when I'm going up the stairs, is that I'm asthmatic. So I feel this climate change or this global effect very acutely. And every time I talk about climate change, I speak from it for like a really personal point of view. I'm based in California, and when we have wildfires, the smoke gets so thick that it's hard for me to walk outside. And I don't even have the most extreme asthma. I know other people who struggle with it even more. And when we have these sorts of weather events, when we have these sorts of extreme climate disasters, there are thousands of children who don't go to school, who are hospitalized, whose parents can't go to work, and have all these like massive downstream effects. So not to bring the mood down, but when I think about climate change and climate tech, I really love to bring it back down to the personal, and the actual reason why we're doing this is for a cleaner, better climate and planet.
So that's a hard comment to follow, but I'll say I agree, Nneka. Thanks for making it. I mean, look, it's making it personal. This is clearly not just an environmental purpose we're all here for. It's that plus. Let's go to questions. So Sophie, we've seen many billions of dollars flowing into this new fun field of climate tech. Where is it all coming from? What are the real numbers?
Yeah, so we cover this in detail. You could call us pretty data obsessed at Climate Tech VC. And I'm really glad that many other outlets are starting to pick this up as well, including, of course, PitchBook just launching their new vertical of climate tech as well, which is exciting and much needed. So we track this in detail for the early stage part of the ecosystem. So think up to the growth stage pre-IPO, and then maybe Lisa can take it over from there, but put some hard numbers behind it. In the first quarter of this year, so think January through August-ish timeline, we saw 16 billion of early stage capital pouring into the space through deals. There were over 1,000 investors, investment funds that participated in that, about 300 of which we would classify as like actively involved in climate tech and less a fluke and more an active strategy. And happy to share like how that splits out, but really we see a host of expected categories, right, from energy and infrastructure, food and ag, and then some more emerging ones, including carbon tech and one that we call climate, that's really climate intelligence. The quick and dirty version of that data, I suppose, is majority of deals are in the energy space, and then the majority of capital is actually flowing into the food and ag space. And so I think that's and into transportation. And so that's informed by a lot of these large EV deals and SPACs that are happening, and also a large amount of capital flowing into the kind of branded alternative meat segment that is indeed also part of climate tech, although consumer deals look very different than kind of the more traditional like B2B climate tech plays. So at a high level, that's the amount. It's more than double that since we announced those numbers publicly halfway through the year. So look out for an updated report from us. We tend to put it out every 6 months, but I think it's moving fast enough that we need to put it out every 9 months, which means we're on the docket for that one dropping quite soon. And talked about the categories, and then maybe should share about where that capital is coming from. So it's being deployed through a whole bunch of different funds, but deployment is different from where the capital is originating from. And to that end, we should really, zoom into the institutional investment vehicles from pension funds or sovereign wealth funds that have earmarked enormous quantities of money towards ESG capital. And I know the other panelists and friends here can talk to that more, but my hot take is perhaps that there might even be a bit of a misallocation in some ways, the supply-demand imbalance between the flows from the top wanting to deploy into solutions and the solution base not being, at least at the early stage, quite ready for all of that capital yet to be squarely deployed into pure play climate tech. It's growing quickly, but there might even be a nice imbalance of too much demand and not yet enough supply. So if you're a climate founder or thinking about a climate entrepreneur in the audience, there's really never been a better time.
In other words, this is an entrepreneur's market. Police-found companies' valuations look great these days, All right, straight from Sophie. Sounds good. Let's go to NECA. So we're hearing lots of capital flowing into climate tech, hooray, but it's not evenly distributed. What are areas maybe that you're seeing in the deal flow versus what you're not seeing? What needs to be funded to hit, say, these goals in the Paris Agreement in terms of innovation that are not being taken seriously enough, let's say?
Yeah, so I think there are different ways we can think about capital allocation. There's like an amazing amount of funding that's directed towards science and research that comes out of SBIR and other sorts of government grants. But there isn't a ton of non-dilutive funding or a lot of funding for service-based companies. And when you look at the typical business that is founded in the United States, a lot of them are service-based businesses. They're not ones that require deep technical or science knowledge. They're really about implementation. So if we know that we have some of the answers amongst us right now, how do we really proliferate technology into places that have historically been left behind? So, how do we get the technology that we get in San Francisco and Boston into places like Tulsa, Oklahoma, into places like Nebraska, into places like North Carolina outside of the Research Triangle? So when I think about places that need more funding, right now we've seen policy really push that through incentives, so tax plans or LCFS credits and things like that. But a lot of the areas that are being left behind don't necessarily have those mechanisms. So that's where private markets come in and have to offer solutions that are better than the status quo. And we've seen tons of technologists like hurtling towards down the cost curve. Sophie talked a little bit about the money that's going into the transportation industry. And the reason why I think we're seeing so much of that funding is because at this point, it makes sense in most places in the US if you have access to charging at home or efficient charging near you to get an electric vehicle if you can afford it. Or when we're looking at solar pricing in terms of the levelized cost of electricity, we're seeing way more solar being rolled out just because it's costing a lot less than the typical utility bill. But what's not less is the upfront costs. So how do regular everyday Americans get the upfront capital, loans, et cetera, to install solar on their homes if they're homeowners, or afford some of these electric vehicles that are northwards of $60,000? So I'd love to see more funding into fintech that's supporting, your average everyday American getting access to the technologies that other people can get very easily if you're in a major world city, but less easily if you're in a rural suburb. Additionally, finding ways that we can get some of the technology that already exists really into the hands of, everyday mom and pop stores and everyday people.
Yes, I think, Nneka, you make a great point that although it's exciting to think about only venture-funded companies in climate tech, that's not the funding that's appropriate for most companies that can be part of the climate solution. So, good reminder. Nneka also mentioned fintech, as in like fintech plus climate tech, or fintech, or really business model innovation plus climate tech. If fintech is your jam, there's a great report that combines fintech and climate tech from a group called New Energy Nexus. Maybe this was put out 6 or 9 months ago. So this is your homework, should you choose to accept it. All right, let's go to Lisa. So probably within those numbers Sophie mentioned, there are financial investors, think VC or high net worths, and there are corporate strategic investors. On the latter, you have a lot of perspective there. So can you say more about the role of corporates in terms of either corporate VC or being early partners to help give traction to companies that then allow them to raise the capital they need to grow?
Yeah, thanks. I'll talk more about kind of some of our experiences at AES and how we played in the corporate space. And at AES, we've taken an approach with a dedicated team called AES Next that really does the detailed looks at companies and at solutions that we think can make a difference in addressing climate challenges. So what we do is not a broad-based spattering of capital. We really do in-depth research to what specific companies that we want to invest in and what's that thesis. This goes all the way up to our board of directors at AES, where we have an innovation and technology committee. And I'll tell you a little bit about some of our experiences. I mentioned Fluence earlier, but Fluence was an early AES, probably more than 10 years ago, started looking at batteries for our own business and saw that as the kind of holy grail for energy. And we ended up doing some pilots and testing and did a joint venture ultimately with Siemens that, again, we took that company public, Fluence, as battery energy storage. But part of our learning in that company was what were the challenges we were trying to solve, and how would this large scale battery storage really revolutionize the whole, electric space. We've done this with other investment companies. We've one of also in our portfolio is a company called Uplight, which is really a portfolio company that is a customer engagement platform for utilities and their customers, and that offers them solutions for energy needs. So as NECA mentioned, you don't necessarily have to have, a solar module or panels on your roof to get clean energy. You can do this through a customer engagement platform where you can buy from community solar, or you can have energy efficiency programs. So we've really looked at the companies that we choose to invest in. How can we help them grow by helping know what the problem is and be a customer or facilitator for their growth? We have a couple more that we're working on. One is 5B, which is a solar systems company that really thinks about the land space requirement for solar and deployment at speed. And so that's a company that we're investing in. It came out of Australia. And then another one is Motor, which is a platform that we're developing for electric vehicles. And part of that, again, as NECA said, is a platform for customers. Again, this fits well with some of our other businesses for EV leasing and sales. We're also looking at some innovative programs for low income in terms of charging, but that fits with our utilities platform, because then again, we can have managed charging that helps lower rates for everyone, but also helps, again, in the development of the electric vehicle market. So again, our approach is really choosing investment, being a customer and a partner, but not bringing that corporate overlay and helping companies solve problems and scale.
Got it, thanks. NECA, let's go to you. So we've discussed on prior panels today about the challenge, let's say, of diversity, equity, and inclusion within climate tech, renewables, et cetera. Can you talk more about progress that's being made? Maybe it relates to the work you're doing with the Green Tech Noir community or otherwise. And then I guess how we're still failing, if you will, to address these issues.
Sure. I'm happy to say that, the progress that we've seen in the last 12 months versus the last few years of investing and highlighting founders of color is, magnificent. We've seen some companies make announcements about how they plan to change their supply chain or their investing mix, and we've seen no accountability or no change at all. However, there's a lot of programs that have really stood up and shine at this time. So Google for Startups did a recent cohort of people of color founders, as well as Apple had their Impact Accelerator recently, and really focused on not just investing in women and Black-led founders, but also utilizing their technology in a commercial application that could just be a huge game changer for startup. A contract from a company like that is definitely a great stamp of approval or stamp of, reputation for founders. But at the end of the day, those are just, one-off programs, and they're also only able to serve a small number, a couple dozen companies at a time. What's really interesting is organizations like VC Include, who have started programs, and many other fund-of-fund programs that are focused on highlighting emerging managers, so new venture capital funds, organizations like the Community Fund, which have some specific climate focuses. So we're going to see more VCs that look more like the population of this country. We're seeing organizations like Energy Impact Partners specifically create a fund called Elevate to invest in Indigenous American, Latinx American, Black American founders that were led companies. We're also seeing organizations like Browning the Green Space, which is based in the Northeast, really expanding their impact by creating accelerators with partnerships with other venture capitalists, et cetera. So where I'm seeing the most amount of success is where we're having collaborative efforts. So it's not enough to announce that there's a problem. It's not enough to announce that you're going to do something different. I think the success that we're seeing is where large organizations utilize their power to highlight smaller organizations, then participate in the development of the next generation of decision makers and capital allocators. And then from there, have a direct contribution from their major funds in order to allow for other organizations in the future to also have that money in a rolling fund, or not necessarily a rolling fund, but an ongoing commitment. So I think that's really exciting. Now, these are organizations I can talk about because I'm in the energy space, but I think we need to see more of that, not just, in the energy space, but what about transportation? What about food and agriculture? There's so many amazing founders that are looking at things like carbon capture, nature-based solutions. And a lot of those spaces are still also largely white and male. And we need to kind of really push for, when we're at conferences, that we have more of a diverse panel. It's very cool to be on this panel here with 3 women. When we're at these invite-only conferences, really focusing on ensuring that the invitation list looks as diverse as the people that we're trying to serve as well.
And can you say more about Green Tech Noir and maybe when the next event might be?
Sure. So we are a collective for Black people in diaspora working on climate change, whether you're an investor or founder, a policymaker, a closed community of partners, and also open community of allies as well. So we have an event today in New York City during COP, and then we have an event on Thursday, next Thursday in the Bay Area after the Invest conference. So if you're around, we'll be happy to have you. More details on social media.
Hear, hear. Sophie, can you talk about areas of funding that are missing and who might be providing those solutions, hopefully like soon?
Hopefully like soon, here. Yeah, we just dropped a report on covering this topic, maybe from the optimistic side, which is, I think we called it a buyer's guide to climate capital, the climate capital stack, something along those lines. Check it out if you haven't seen it yet. But essentially, our newsletter is called Climate Tech VC, but we recognize that the climate tech innovation will not only be scaled using venture capital funding. That's a very particular form of capital. And so we're trying to highlight awareness across the full climate capital stack. So that includes everything from non-dilutive funding sources and grants and government funding through to alternative ways of going public or crowdsourcing, you name it. We include it and include a bunch of examples around that. So I'd say generally there's an overweighting towards more private equity types of capital, venture, and true kind of like PE and traditional IPO, and increasingly like SPACs within that. But one avenue that I'd like to call out is revenue-based financing, which is brand new, and I had not honestly thought too much about it myself until a couple months ago. There's some organizations, including one called Enduring Planet, that are really highlighting this category. It's worth a quick Google if you're not familiar with that category yourself. And then another shout out that's very, very well earned is everything that's going on with Jigar Shah and his amazing team at the Department of Energy Loans Office, where they have ample capital to deploy, and they're frankly like opening the door, saying we're open for business and we want to back solutions to lead them into the deployment stage, and they're willing to go relatively early on that and take on some technical risk there. So both of those organizations are interesting new ways of scaling climate innovation beyond just traditional venture. But of course, it's worth noting catalytic capital, which is hard to define sometimes, but perhaps can be summed up as willingness to fund businesses through valleys of death and take on a little bit more risk in return for alignment around like some additional ROIs on impact metrics. Much more catalytic capital is needed. TBD where that comes from. It can't all be necessarily just from philanthropists or the government, but over the past 12 months and increasingly as the Silicon Valley tech titans think that climate is increasingly real and maybe something that they want to personally deploy some of their capital behind. Some of those more catalytic gaps are being backed by individuals, but I hope that to our point about making sure that climate is solved representatively for representative populations. My hope is that this isn't just a tech titans dilemma, and that we can think strategically about aligning returns and profiting off of building solutions along the way that also looks pretty equitable.
Great. Yeah, I would encourage you to find this report Sophie just mentioned. It's now on my reading list as well. Thanks, Sophie. Just on revenue-based financing, in case you didn't catch that, right? Imagine an investor getting a portion of revenue versus taking a portion of ownership in your company. If you're a founder, that sounds pretty enticing. I would mention maybe just two others real quick. If you haven't heard of folk financing, FOAK, first of a kind financing, it's more like a model, not a company or a certain instrument. But think about companies with whatever, $50 million of venture capital. Cool, you've de-risked the technology mostly, but now you have to convert that to infrastructure funding, right? How do you fund a $100 million project? That is a huge gap right now, and if that's solved, there's lots to finance. And the other would just be blended capital, right? So how can you combine the kinds of capital Sophie referenced, catalytic or non-dilutive, government, foundations, et cetera, that maybe you're fine being a first loss reserve, if you will, that allows some risk to be shielded, so more mainstream capital comes in. Let's go to maybe some career advice, if we can. We have a room full of folks, including myself, that would love to hear that. So let's see, Lisa, how about career advice for folks? Things you did right or things you would like to have done differently, let's say?
Well, I guess I would say the things most memorable to me and the startup that I was in, I think it was really all around design thinking. So I encourage people that the path is not always straight. If you focus on the problem and ideate, you've got to keep implementing and go through multiple kind of phases to really get to a solution. So when I was at First Solar, which is a solar panel manufacturer, in the very early days, I can remember some crazy product ideas like solar panels on refrigerators on, the reservation here in Arizona, or going through until ultimately, our first kind of business model was really going to utility scale or free field at that time, photovoltaic systems, because really to drive down cost and to get to scale quickly. So we went through several iterations of the market and of the system. So I just encourage everyone to remember kind of their design thinking, learning about, the inspiration, the ideation, and the implementation. And please don't ever forget, as we're thinking about climate solutions, to always think about also, for me, cradle to cradle, thinking about the holistic solutions. So, and I know they're all rock stars in the audience and all rock stars there. So I just want to, again, encourage them all to go help solve the world's problems because we all need to focus on the climate solutions.
Can you talk about, let's be direct here. Can you talk about where the biggest needs are for you all at AES?
Yeah, I honestly, we're focusing on, we have short-term energy storage. We've got a lot of renewables development, but I think we're all focused on that grid and how to ensure reliability and this transition to make sure we can get to 100% carbon-free energy. And we're focused on that. We're also very focused on how you can use the customer interface and systems such as EVs or other devices to make sure we're using the most of the grid system. I mean, load factor is a technical term, but it's, we're only using about 50. We design a system for the peak and the peak usage. So we really, if we could manage that infrastructure there's a lot more there that we could do without adding cost. So I think that's kind of some of the things that we have to think about to make sure we're, providing sustainable, affordable energy solutions to everyone. And I think that's what's really important, is that we want no one left behind, which means you can't just put solar on people's roofs who can afford it. You have to think about, 100% of the people on the grid and how to make that cost effective for everyone.
Cool. And if you had to pick one action item for students to take next week, what would it be?
Oh boy. I know they're all rock stars. I just really encourage them to think about the solutions that they're passionate about, because I think when whatever you're passionate about, that's what you're gonna, help design to change the world. So really think and tap into their passions and look for a match of their values to focus on where they want to go and engaging in climate solutions.
Thanks. Nneka, how about you? Sectors, geographies, advice for next week.
Yeah, advice. I always say drink water and get some sleep. This is a marathon and not a sprint. I think when you hear the news, it feels like everything is overwhelming and that the big guys in the top can't even figure it out. Why does it feel like we, the little people or the medium-sized people, have to do all the hard work? But in reality, a lot of small people working together can get a lot done. So you might not be the president of the country yet, or the leader of a think tank, or sitting in Glasgow right now, but you have more power than you think. And you can allocate your resources towards, solving whatever problem it is. And I mean, when we talk about climate tech, that space is so broad. So for you, it could be that you want to get into sustainable farming and figure out how to stop spending so much money on your water bill by stop using your sprinkler, right? It also could be something as wide as you're really interested in material science. And we need to take some of those brains that are going to NASA and are going to, some other fields and pull them into the world of climate tech. So there's space for you if you're a project manager, there's space for you if you're an accountant, there's space for you if you're a copywriter to allocate your time and talents and resources into this journey that we're on. And, do it at the time and at the rate that it makes sense for you. Going back to what I said, there's a just transition. You can't just flip the switch and make everything better again, as much as we'd like it to be that way. But if it's just small steps, if it's getting your corporate company that you work for right now to switch to recycled paper instead of, regular white paper, if it's, allocating some money from your corporate foundation towards grassroots, that's a step. So just that you always have a choice and you're not boxed in, even when it feels like everything around you is chaos.
It's a marathon, not a sprint, folks, right? Drink your water. Sophie, what you got?
Running with a bunch of those existing themes, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts on advice all the time, but mostly I'm eager to hear it from other folks. But running with that, I'd suggest that in this current market, there's a scarcity of talent in lots of ways, and you guys are the talent sitting in the room. So your voice matters a lot. Like, businesses want to hire you. They cannot scale without you. You're getting an MBA or some secondary type of degree here. What you say during recruiting, during the hiring practice, matters. So if you make it clear that you don't want to work at a business that doesn't take climate change seriously, you're really speaking into a microphone there. So, we're seeing more and more examples here, whether it's at the big tech companies. My personal bias is that I think in lots of ways, Stripe and Shopify and these other businesses are pushing hard on their carbon removal strategy because it's actually a pretty clever recruitment and retainment platform for engineers. But and then also at McKinsey, right? I think it came out 2 weeks ago or so that over 1,000 employees are pretty disgruntled and ready to leave because McKinsey's working with 50 or 40 of the top emitting fossil fuel, et cetera, businesses. And I know a lot of the folks that signed that petition, and they've walked away from that job, and they're now actively working on climate. So anyway, your voice right now in particular matters a lot. But of course, there's tons of different ways to work on climate. And I'll suggest that most of those paths aren't evident and aren't written yet. So, N of one example, but I did management consulting. I left that. I started a business. I had no idea how to start a business. Figured that out. Now I don't technically have a job, right? Like I'm making it up as I go and starting things, and would not have expected 3 months ago where I'm at today, and definitely not 12 months ago. So be okay with a little bit of ambiguity if that's your style. If it's not, there's lots of structure places for you to tap into climate as well. But this space is evolving incredibly fast, and it's also okay to not be an expert in all things. Lean in on either your kind of subject matter area or your functional area, or some like inherent personality trait that leans well into climate. And then I'd also suggest to the evidence of to the point of you're more powerful right now than maybe you even give yourself credit for. Like as you're learning, pay it back, pay it forward. So maybe you're very good at listening to others and giving advice or acting as a mirror. Like be a mentor to others around you, and you'll learn from their learnings, right? Like in real time. Or maybe you're a good synthesizer. So Twitter is your game. I don't know, put out those hot fire tweets, or maybe communicating or writing, right? Like, so find a way to add back to the ecosystem, even as you're learning from it, because there's no right answers. It's very community driven, and it's highly collaborative.
Sophie, do I recall correctly that there is a job board function on Climate Tech VC, maybe?
Oh, indeed there is. Yes. Putting our money where our mouth is. So yes, there's a jobs board. It's hosted through a great tech platform called Palette, which hosts a bunch of other community organizer leader groups. So maybe climate's your thing, check ours out. If early stage startups are another, check it out on another Palette platform. And then I think it's at the top of the list right now because we just published it, but we're hiring at Climate Tech VC for our first paid position. We're dubbing it kind of chief of staff, business operations manager type, someone to come in and run what we've got going for the past 2 years and help 30% or so of your time with the growth vectors as well. So if you're a heavily detail oriented person that wants to help wrangle my very lateral brain and speak to our 20,000 person audience, then drop us a note.
Sophie, just between us, I have your hire from this audience, so we'll talk later, okay?
Hey, well then I want to put in a plug. Go to AES.com and look at our careers page. We have a ton of openings, especially in our renewables business, for all kinds of functions. Because I just want to echo what Sophie said. Incredible growth especially in our renewables side of the business. But your voices, everybody's looking for talent, and you're the talent, I think, as Sophie said. And I think it's really important that you align with the culture in the organization. And so please check us out. We got a lot of jobs open right now.
Can I triple down and say that we are also hiring, since we have all these great people on the line? We have investment jobs, we have solar jobs. Check out alignclimatecapital.com.
So it's not a war for talent, but it's something up here, okay? Just three last things. As you design your life, conveniently, there's a book called Design Your Life based on a course from Stanford. I started reading it last night. I'm there with you. If you did climate tech, a little quick personal plug, I've got a podcast called Climate Torch. All we do is interview climate CEOs and climate investors. And a newsletter, not quite as popular as Sophie's, shout out. It's called Zero on Substack, a personal side to your growth, not just the business, but look, it takes both. We're done. Let's go drink and celebrate climate,